Rick, don't be so selfish. For once in your life, do as I ask. How stubborn are you? Is it really so difficult? You act as if I'm sending you to a predator's den, and I'm merely asking you to meet my business partner's daughter," David said resentfully, looking at his son reproachfully. Rick sat cross-legged on a sofa in the luxurious living room, pretending to correspond with someone. His father stood beside him, having spent hours pleading with his son to go on a date with his business partner's daughter. The young man was reluctant to spend an evening with a girl he had never met. He had only heard that his father's associate was eager to introduce his lonely, beautiful daughter to the future heir of a vast fortune. Rick had no desire to waste his time on local millionaires' daughters, whom he considered spoiled and incapable of surprising or charming him. Accustomed to being the centre of attention and feeling like the king of women's hearts, he couldn't be impressed by mere flashy appearances, exquisite taste, or expensive clothes. He was certain that this rich man's daughter had nothing to offer but what he already had in abundance. The handsome young son of a large trading company's CEO was considered the town's most eligible bachelor. He was the cherished dream and primary target of many local beauties. Rick was constantly surrounded by attractive, well-mannered girls. Yet deep down, he felt lonely. He knew he hadn't found true happiness yet, believing it awaited him somewhere in the future. "Father, how many times must I ask you not to introduce me to your friends and partners' daughters?" Rick said angrily. "You needn't meddle in my private life or pressure me. I'll decide for myself when and with whom I date. I'm not a child, so stop trying to impose your will on me. I'm leaving. Don't wait up, I'll be back in the morning." With that, Rick shot his father a defiant look and hurriedly left the luxurious mansion in the city's best district. He was furious with his father's persistent attempts to match him with a worthy match, the daughters of his acquaintances and friends. Rick had no interest in building relationships with them, believing that fate would bring the right person into his life when the time was right. The young man went to a cafe where he often relaxed with his only friend. Todd, like Rick, was also the son of a wealthy man. The friends sat by the lakeshore, enjoying the breathtakingly beautiful sunset and fresh air. Rick indignantly told his friend about his father's relentless attempts to introduce him to his partner's daughter. "It's surely another shallow girl in a Versace dress," Rick chuckled. "A brainless walking doll in designer clothes. I'm not interested in talking to such ladies. I've seen plenty of them already." "You're wrong, buddy." Todd shook his head disapprovingly. "You haven't even met this girl, yet you've already formed an unfair opinion of her. You can't judge someone without talking to them and getting to know them well. In my view, girls simply spoil you with attention. Are you any better than those you've been dating and spending nights with in clubs and bars? If you weren't a rich man's son, you wouldn't think this way. Intelligence doesn't depend on wealth or the cost of one's clothes. Do you see that girl collecting garbage on the shore?" The friends simultaneously looked at a young, red-haired woman in a simple denim dress. She held a garbage bag in one hand while picking up litter left by vacationers with the other. The stranger hurriedly tossed empty lemonade bottles and wrappers into her large bag. She looked tired and worn out. It was unusually hot that day, and she glanced enviously at passing girls holding bottles of cold drinks. "I see her, so what?" Rick muttered irritably. "What can you say about her? She's clearly not wearing a Versace or Valentino. If a rich man's daughter means nothing to you, then who is she? Maybe she's a real treasure. What do you think? Could you win her heart?" "What's there to do? Just an ordinary country girl who came to the big city for money and man. Don't make me laugh. What treasure? Look at her. She's got a pretty face, but nothing more. I doubt she's any different from millions of other girls trying to find their place in the sun. Can I win her over? Of course. Can I win her over? Of course I can, Rick said confidently. I could charm a country girl in an hour. Want to see for yourself? I'll prove it to you. I think she's a tough nut to crack, and she's probably out of your league. Well, if you're so sure of yourself, try to win over this red-haired daughter of the sun. If you can, I'll fulfill your every wish. But you have to become like her to do it. For 3 months, give up your expensive car and the things you buy in high-end Italian boutiques. Become a simple worker in some factory. Win her over with an empty wallet. If she agrees to marry you, a poor man, in 3 months, I'll do whatever you want. I accept the challenge, Rick replied thoughtfully, patting his friend's shoulder. Soon enough, that simple girl will be chasing me day and night. You'll regret ever deciding to argue with me. It's a deal. I'll bring you some ordinary worker's clothes today and buy you a cheap cell phone. We'll transform the golden boy beyond recognition. You wanted something new? Here's your chance. The next evening, Rick returned to the place where he had recently dined with his best friend. He left his expensive watch and Gucci suit at home, reluctantly putting on simple sport pants and an unremarkable white t-shirt that fit him perfectly. For the next 3 months, Rick had to give up his fancy car, which he sometimes talked to as a child, and moved into an old, used vehicle. He invented a new biography for himself, instantly transforming from an enviable bachelor and a rich man's son into a lonely cannery employee. Rick bought a cold lemonade and confidently approached the girl, who was diligently cleaning her assigned area. Sighing heavily and wiping sweat from her forehead, she looked tired as she swept. Rick coughed to draw her attention. When the red-haired stranger flinched in surprise and sharply raised her head, he smiled playfully and said in an affectionate voice, I can't help but wonder who makes such a beautiful, fragile girl work under this scorching sun. That person must have no heart. I'd like to take this broom from you and stand in your place. I brought you a refreshing drink. Rick handed the girl a bottle of cold water. She looked at him with a scrutinizing gaze and replied, Well, thank you. I was just dreaming of a cold drink. I didn't expect anyone to take pity on me. All right, noble prince, take the broom and sweep. I'll sit in the shade and rest. Robin abruptly handed the broom to the dazed Rick and, yawning carelessly, lowered herself into the nearby bench. Rick froze in surprise. He had never before held a broom, let alone swept with one. He looked at the red-haired girl, whose snow-white face bore a blissful smile. At that moment he realized that victory would not come as easily to him as he had expected. But there was no turning back. Rick started sweeping, clearly struggling and revealing his inexperience. Robin laughed and, looking at the embarrassed young man, said, It looks like you've had your first ever introduction to a broom today. Congratulations! Why did you volunteer for a task you don't know how to do? Well, put it down over there. I'll take a short break and then get back to work. And thank you for your kindness. Rick said nothing. He carelessly tossed the broom on the ground and sat down next to the green-eyed stranger, who was still smiling mockingly. The young man gazed into her large emerald eyes and thought that a girl with such striking features shouldn't be holding a broom, but rather a diamond-studded piece of jewellery or a designer handbag. Of course, Rick knew that not everyone was as lucky as he was, for it was rare for a child to have the chance to be born into such a wealthy family. He had always been completely satisfied with his life and fate, never before considering how people without expensive cars and luxurious houses survive. I confess, I've never swept before, he admitted, hanging his head in embarrassment. I have a slightly different speciality. I work in a factory. We don't deal with brooms there."
"Really?" Robin asked, surprise in her voice. "I can't tell from your hands that you work in a factory. They're very delicate and well-groomed."
"It's just genetics. My mum had the same," Rick said with annoyance, amazed at the girl's attentiveness. "By the way, my name is Rick. May I know yours?"
"Actually, I don't usually meet people on the street, but since you took pity on me, gave me cold water and offered to help, I'll make an exception. I'm Robin." While the young people were sitting on the bench, Rick used this time to learn as much as possible about his new acquaintance. It turned out that Robin had come from far away, failed her exams and now rented a room with a friend. She worked as a waitress and took on odd jobs in her spare time. Rick told Robin a fictitious story of his life, claiming that he had been left alone in his youth and had been surviving as best he could ever since. He said that he also rented a small room in a dormitory and saved every penny to someday move into his own apartment. "My job is hard, of course, but I'm not complaining. The most important thing is that I earn my own bread. I don't ask anyone for help. I provide for myself as best I can. Yes, I don't have my own place or a cool car, but I sincerely believe that one day this will change, and I'll start to earn a decent living. I'll persistently work towards it. Nothing is impossible. There's only desire." Rick didn't notice how quickly time flew by. An unexpected phone call brought him back to reality. Perking up, he glanced at his watch and was stunned. He was late for a meeting with Todd, who was waiting for a detailed report on his acquaintance with Robin. Returning home, Rick hurriedly showered, changed his clothes, and getting into his favourite car, a gift from his father, went to meet his friend. Sitting behind the wheel, he recalled his long and fascinating conversation with Robin. The girl seemed quite nice and interesting to him. The young man caught himself thinking that he would like to continue communicating with her. Robin and Rick met again a couple of days later. They walked in the park, feeding ducks and pigeons. The young man, forgetting everything else, watched the red-haired girl, eagerly absorbing her every word. She attracted his attention by constantly surprising him. A guy spoiled by women's attention. When a stray dog suddenly ran up to the couple, Rick froze in fear, while Robin approached the fluffy creature and affectionately stroked the top of its head. The dog fell at the girl's feet and began licking her hands, which never stopped caressing its white head. "What are you doing? It's a stray dog. Take your hands off it. It might bite you, and you'll end up in hospital with rabies. What if it's carrying some terrible disease?" exclaimed Rick, looking at Robin, who was enthusiastically talking to the dog. "She won't bite," said Robin in a soft voice, smiling kindly. "This is an incredibly sweet, affectionate, gentle girl who has already grown fond of me. We quickly found a common language. She's healthy. She just had bad luck with her previous owners. See the scar next to her left eye?" Rick looked closely at the dog's snow-white face. He noticed a large scar near her left eye and was horrified. The young man realized that only a human could have left this terrible mark. He was shaken to his core by what he saw. He had never considered that many innocent, defenseless animals become victims of cruel, heartless people. Rick had never been interested in nature or animals before. He was much more concerned with endless parties in nightclubs and girls with whom he spent nights out. "Pet her," Robin said quietly, suddenly taking Rick's hand. "Don't be afraid, she won't bite you. She was once hurt terribly and almost left blind, but she remained kind and affectionate despite that. I feed her regularly. I can't take her in yet, but one day I will." Rick looked at the statuesque, beautiful girl whose red hair danced with sunbeams, and his heart filled with a trembling excitement he had never experienced before. The young man realized He had never met anyone remotely like Robin. To him, Robin was a wonderful book full of secrets, surprises, and riddles. He timidly touched the dog's soft head and smiled broadly. At that time, he himself had not yet suspected how much this brief moment, filled with touching tenderness and love, would influence his fate. "Tell me, friend, how are things on the personal front? Have you already charmed the red-haired provincial girl? Is it hard for you without a cool car and other luxuries of a rich life? All the girls used to fall at your feet, but now you'll have to work hard. Show the beauty of your soul to this woman so she'll appreciate your character, not your wallet," Todd said in an ironic, pompous tone, looking at Rick curiously. Rick didn't hear his friend's impertinent words. His heart and thoughts were occupied with the girl he hadn't seen for 3 days. Robin had disappeared. She didn't answer her phone or come to work. It was as if she had vanished. Rick couldn't find peace, consumed by worry and an unbearable longing for her. He went to the cafe where Robin worked every day, but no one knew where she was. The young man realized he knew too little about the life of the girl he had begun to care for. The fact seriously upset him. Rick walked around with a sullen look, noticing nothing around him. "Stop mocking me," he muttered angrily, looking at Todd. "I haven't seen Robin for 3 days now. It's like she's vanished into thin air. She doesn't come to work, she doesn't answer her phone. I don't know what to do." "What concerns you more? Her sudden disappearance, or that the risk of losing the bet has increased dramatically since she vanished?" "I don't give a damn about the bet," exclaimed Rick. "I'm worried about Robin. What if something's happened to her? She has no one to stand up for her. She's alone in a big city with no money and no connections. What if Robin's in trouble?" Suddenly, Rick's cell phone rang. He pulled his smartphone out of his pocket with a sigh and saw that it was his father calling. The young man reluctantly pressed the phone to his ear and quietly said hello. Mr. Tyson asked his son to urgently go to his business partner's house and pick up some documents. Rick had no desire to go to the other side of the city and solve his father's problems, but he couldn't refuse. His father's driver had suddenly fallen ill, and his assistant was busy with another important matter. Rick quickly said goodbye to Todd and got into the car. Mr. Tyson's business partner lived in a luxurious Mediterranean-style villa with an amazing panoramic view and a huge swimming pool. Rick, who had thought nothing could surprise him any more, was impressed. But he was even more surprised when he saw Robin standing not far from the pool, talking to the maids. The young man froze, unable to believe his eyes. Just a few meters away stood the very person he had been desperately searching for. Robin also noticed Rick and was stunned. The girl ran up to the dazed guy and exclaimed, "Rick, how did you find me? What are you doing here?" I was going to ask you the same question. You suddenly disappeared. I haven't been able to find you for 3 days. I was sure something had happened to you. I was worried. And you?" "Rick," Robin said, touching his arm, "let's talk outside and I'll explain everything to you, okay?" The young man nodded and followed the girl. Once outside, Rick, forgetting why he had come, began to question her confusedly. "I work here as a maid," said Robin, looking intently into the guy's bewildered eyes. "I just got the job. I'm sorry I've been missing. I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone these days. I needed some time to adjust. What are you doing here?" "The plant manager asked me to give the landlord of this house some documents, so I couldn't refuse," Rick said, saying the first thing that came to mind. "I missed you terribly. I realized I couldn't live another day without you. Let's meet tonight, shall we?" The young man gently touched the girl's cheek, and she shuddered in surprise. Robin stared into Rick's burning eyes and sighed languidly, feeling her composure slipping away. She was drawn to Rick, and this intoxicating attraction drove her wild, enveloping her consciousness in a blissful fog. The young couple agreed to meet that evening on the embankment and parted ways. Rick forgot his father's request. It no longer concerned him. He had also forgotten about the bet he had made with his friend Todd. Rick and Robin watched the dawn together for the first time, creating vivid memories that would last a lifetime. They walked hand in hand along the embankment. At midnight, a heavy rain began to fall, but even its power couldn't tear the lovers apart. Thick raindrops ran down their faces, unnoticed. Rick realized he had fallen for this gentle, affectionate girl with fire-colored hair. When she was near, his heart raced and his soul soared, experiencing an intoxicating bliss, an unparalleled joy. "Wait," Robin whispered, her voice trembling as she pulled away from Rick's lips to catch her breath. "This isn't right. I can't do this. I have to go. We won't work out. We're making a mistake." "What?" Rick gasped, shocked. "Why? You want to leave me? We're so good together, aren't we? What's wrong? Don't you love me? Or is it something else? Is it because I have nothing and I'm just a factory worker?" "It's not about you. There's no future for us. I have to stop this before it goes too far. We shouldn't see each other anymore. Don't look at me like that. You're breaking my heart. I don't want to hurt you, which is why I have to end it. Our relationship isn't going anywhere good." Rick pulled Robin closer, his kisses transporting her to a world of intoxicating pleasure, finally silencing the voice of reason. Robin, realizing she couldn't, and didn't want to, resist, surrendered to the tender embrace of the man who had turned her life upside down. Rick was happy with Robin, and grew more convinced each day that he had found his soulmate. He wanted to tell her the truth about who he really was, but fear held him back. It frightened him that Robin, unknowingly, made him think about family and children, something he'd never considered before. The young man worried about how his father would react to the news that he wanted to bring home a simple provincial maid. He was certain his father wouldn't be pleased to hear his only son had gotten involved with a girl from a different social class. But Rick wasn't going to back down. He was ready to fight desperately for his happiness and love. "Hey, buddy, where have you disappeared to?" Todd exclaimed when the friends met. "I don't recognize you at all. You're not yourself. You don't talk about your amour adventures anymore. You work hard. You're home every night. Are you in love? Has that redhead charmed you so quickly? I thought we were just playing around, but you seem to have a serious crush on the perky girl. I wanted to teach you a lesson, but I think I overdid it. You'll have to propose to Robin soon. Remember, I don't know what's going on, but our bet is still on. She has to say yes, and you have to get her answer on tape. Only then will I admit defeat." His friend's words made Rick contemplate marriage. He wanted to marry Robin, but not because of the bet. The young man no longer doubted that he had found the one. Although Rick and Robin had known each other for only 2 months, it was enough time for both to realize they were made for each other. Rick recognized that he truly loved Robin and was ready to commit his life to her. He was confident in her loyalty, honesty, and kindness. Only one thing troubled him: the lies present in their relationship. Rick decided to have a serious talk with Robin at their next meeting and confess that he had deceived her by pretending to be poor. The young man bought an expensive ring, intending to propose to Robin. This time, Rick didn't don his unattractive labourer's clothes. Instead, he chose a suit from a famous designer. After tidying himself up, he set off to meet his beloved, brimming with love and excitement. Seeing Robin, Rick smiled broadly and waved. He ran up to her and leaned in for a kiss, but instead received a stinging slap. Stunned, he looked at the girl and saw tears rolling down her cheeks. Robin's face was a mix of confusion and hurt. "How could you do this?" she asked. "You were just playing with me all this time, weren't you? I trusted you. And you—" "Robin, what happened?" he blurted out, staring at the sobbing girl. "What are you talking about? What did I do wrong?" "Don't pretend you don't understand. You know perfectly well," she said. "You played your part brilliantly. Bravo! I give you a standing ovation. Tired of wearing cheap clothes? Decided to pull your favourite Armani suit out of the closet? How could I be so stupid? Your friend told me about your bet. I know why you started courting me. You just wanted to win the bet and prove to your friend that you were clever. You had 3 months to propose to me. Why didn't you say something until now? You should have asked me to marry you a month ago." Rick was shocked by what he heard. He was speechless with surprise, not expecting such a turn of events. Todd's betrayal shook him to the core. Rick couldn't imagine that a close friend could betray him like this. After all, he himself was going to tell Robin almost the whole truth. It should have been him, not Todd. Rick had no doubt that the girl would have accepted the truth more calmly if he had talked to her frankly himself. Rick was seething with anger. His blood boiled with rage at the despicable act of a man he had considered his loyal friend. The girl's tears caused him heartache as he realized he had made an irreparable mistake. "Robin, I've wronged you terribly," Rick exclaimed. "I lied to you. I bet with Todd and started meeting you because I wanted to win a bet. But that was only at the beginning, believe me. Robin, as I got to know you, I fell in love for real. You're the best thing God has sent me, a true treasure. I love you madly and can't live without you. I'm so sorry we started with a lie. I can't fix it or turn back time. Please forgive me if you can. I soon regretted that bet with Todd." "You never loved me," Robin said bitterly, her eyes filled with resentment and disappointment as she looked at Rick. "You only played me, cruelly played me, and I was a naive fool. Don't ever come near me again. Do you hear me? Forget about me. It's over between us. I've learned my lesson. Goodbye, Rick." With that, Robin ran away, choking back tears. Rick was furious. He got into his car and drove to Todd. He burst into Todd's apartment like a whirlwind and punched his friend square in the face. Glaring at him with hatred and contempt, he thundered, "You're nothing but a lowlife." Afraid he couldn't control himself behind the wheel, Rick decided to walk along the embankment to calm down and gather his thoughts. His head spun from everything that had happened. His heart ached, knowing he had hurt the girl he loved with all his heart. The young man felt desperate, realizing that Robin, being too proud, might never forgive him. After calming down, Rick resolved to fight for his happiness. He called and messaged Robin every day, but she neither answered his calls nor replied to his messages. She persistently ignored him, pretending not to notice his attempts to make amends. Robin no longer appeared at the cafe where she had once worked as a waitress. Rick missed her terribly and felt consumed by loneliness. He lost interest in everything that used to bring him joy. After another sleepless night, Rick decided to visit the place where Robin worked as a maid. He remembered well the address of the luxurious villa. Early in the morning he went there, hoping to talk to Robin and once more try to explain everything. To his surprise, half an hour later, he saw the gate open and Robin emerge with a tall, thin man in his 50s. The man gently stroked Robin's cheek, kissed her forehead, then got into his car and drove away. Rick froze in shock. Anger immediately engulfed him. He ran up to the girl and exclaimed, "I see you're not suffering or crying into your pillow. Spending time with your master? Got yourself a wealthy lover, have you?" "Rick!" Robin was surprised to see him. "What are you doing here? Spying on me? I don't have to justify myself to you. You're nothing to me. Go away. I told you I don't want to see you." "So, that's how it is," Rick said resentfully, looking defiantly into Robin's green eyes. "I don't need your excuses. I'm not a fool or blind. I understand everything. Good luck to you." Saying this, Rick got into his car and drove away. Behind the wheel, he called his father and said, "Dad, I agree to meet your business partner's daughter. Let's have them over for a family dinner. We'll get to know each other then. I should have said yes right away. Let's do it." Rick's words pleased Mr. Tyson. He immediately called his partner and invited him, his wife and daughter to a family dinner. After that, he called the housekeeper and informed her that important guests were expected the following evening and the reception should be of the highest standard. Rick was furious with Robin. He was convinced that she had immediately found a replacement for him, that she had begun sleeping with the owner of the rich house where she worked as a maid. The young man was bitterly disappointed by what he had seen on the street. He decided he had been mistaken about Robin, attributing qualities to her that she never possessed. Now he knew that his beloved had turned out to be as hypocritical as those girls from the provinces who came to the big city hoping to seduce any millionaire. Rick berated himself for having opened his heart to the girl and allowing himself to fall in love with her, and to get back at her, he agreed to meet his father's business partner's daughter. When evening came and the important guests arrived, the young man put on his favourite black tuxedo and walked downstairs confidently. But he froze in place when he saw the tall, thin man who had recently hugged and kissed Robin enter the house. Rick was even more shocked when Robin, dressed in a luxurious bright blue dress, entered after the man. Their eyes met. For a moment, Rick and Robin looked at each other, oblivious to their surroundings. Both were in a state of shock. Rick managed to control his emotions. He slowly approached the guests and smiled at them casually. Robin also composed herself and pretended that nothing unusual had happened. The former lovers continued to glance at each other, but no one else noticed. "Son," said Mr. Tyson, looking hopefully at Rick, "this is my business partner's daughter. I've told you about her many times. This is Robin." "We've already met," the girl whispered embarrassedly in one breath. The men were surprised that their children were already acquainted. They knew nothing about what had transpired between Rick and Robin. Rick had questions that kept him in suspense. He couldn't understand how a poor provincial girl had suddenly become the daughter of his father's partner. Had she also deceived him as he had her? Rick offered to give Robin a tour of their unusually beautiful garden, and she readily agreed, wanting to be alone with him. As soon as they were out of earshot, he asked, "What's going on? I don't know what to think anymore. You've turned my whole life upside down. Why are you in my house?" "It's quite simple," Robin replied quietly, taking a deep breath. "A few months ago, my father decided to introduce me to his business partner's son. He asked me to be an obedient model girl and try to charm this promising lad, a marriage he thought would be very advantageous. His presumption enraged me. I refused to indulge my father and socialize with someone just because he came from a wealthy family. My dad's prejudices often infuriate me. He believes the heiress of a large empire should only associate with her own kind. I was furious and told my father I wouldn't meet his business partner's son, that I'd decide whom to be with. I asked him to stay out of my personal life. I admit I was harsh. To punish my insolence, he took away my money and made me work as a waitress in a cafe. He also assigned me an area to clean daily. I had to obey, but anything was better than agreeing to that meeting. It was a matter of principle. I wanted to make it clear that my private life is mine alone, and no one, not even my father, has the right to overstep those boundaries. I was willing to work harder to prove my point. So I started working, and then you appeared and began courting me. At first I ignored you, but your persistence won me over. You snuck into my heart and mind. I fell in love with you. That sweet feeling terrified me. I knew we had no future, but I couldn't help it. I was consumed by my love for you, regardless of what people would say or how my father would react. I wanted to spend my life with you, but then you wounded me deeply with your lies. After I calmed down, I decided I wouldn't let you destroy me. I told my father I'd meet his business partner's son. He was overjoyed, thinking he'd taught me a lesson. I had no idea you'd turn out to be the very son I'd stubbornly refused to meet. Fate is unpredictable. Nothing can surprise me now. Rick listened, dumbfounded. He kept asking himself, is this possible? Has fate, which I've never believed in, decided to show its power? The young man was once again convinced that he and Robin were destined to be together, as fate had stubbornly brought them together and showed no signs of retreating. Rick, still in shock, looked at the girl and realized he still loved her, passionately, ardently, intensely, and couldn't imagine his life without her. I don't even know what to add to your words, Rick whispered, confused. After all, I had almost the same experience as you. I, too, refused to meet you, and resolutely told my father that I would find my soulmate myself without his help. Then I had a bet with a now former friend. Do you know what happened next? At first, I really wanted to win the bet, and then I genuinely fell in love with you. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I was afraid you wouldn't understand, wouldn't forgive me, and would turn away from me. I didn't want to lose you, so I kept quiet. That day, when I came to your house and saw you at the gate with your father, I was furious because I was sure he was your lover. After that, I also told my dad that I agreed to meet you. I didn't care what happened next. I wanted revenge, that's all. Robin, if you leave me now and go away, my life will turn into an eternal dark night. And I will never see the dawn again, because I don't need it if I don't have you by my side. Robin, I can't live without you. Everything lost meaning after we broke up. Please, give me another chance. I'll prove myself worthy of your love. I'll earn your trust again. Just give me that opportunity. Where would I go from you now? Robin replied. It's fate that we will be together. I can't leave now. If I do, I'll leave my heart here, and I'll never be happy again. I can only be happy with you. Why don't we forget about the past and start from scratch? Let's pretend we just met today. Rick grabbed the girl in his arms and spun her around. He was overjoyed, for he had gained the greatest treasure in the world, love, for which one would give everything. They both walked through the garden until nightfall, holding hands tightly. They hugged, kissed, dreamed of the future, and discussed where to spend their honeymoon.